Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is October the 1st, 2024. It has been 3,900 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 223 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 220 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 57 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Monday and Tuesday morning. Our Russia-Ukraine war map is a great companion to the podcast, and there is a link in the podcast description. There are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. It's unchanged from yesterday, so if you want to skip ahead, I won't mind. I won't even know. 1. We're unsure if the current operational tempo is new normal, or if Moscow is attempting to advance as far as possible before fall weather arrives. We maintain that the current operational tempo is unsustainable, and at some point the operational tempo will decline. 2. Continued nuclear threats from Moscow highlight how the world remains caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 3. The lack of a meaningful response by Ukraine's allies and international organizations to open and unrestricted attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure by Russia has convinced Moscow this is an effective strategy with no political consequences. 4. Russia will maintain its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. The continued attacks are increasing the probability of a nuclear accident at one or more of Ukraine's nuclear power plants due to a loss of external power connections. 5. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States is a complete failure that has only encouraged Russia to escalate hybrid and kinetic warfare actions against the NATO alliance and Ukraine's allies and their economic interests. 6. We maintain that autocrat Vladimir Putin's order to recapture the Kursk region of Russia by October the 15th is unrealistic and highly unlikely. 7. In our assessment, it is equally unlikely that Russian forces will capture Toretsk, New York, Mirnograd, Pokrovsk and Selidove by October the 15th. 8. The Russian economy is much weaker than reported. 9. In our assessment, there could be a shift in Washington's policy toward Ukraine's request for deep strikes within Russia after the November the 5th national elections in the United States. Yesterday, Russia carried out 189 discrete assaults, and through September the 30th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks climbed to 174. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported the VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 74 airstrikes, dropping 128 bombs, and ground forces carried out almost 4,700 fire missions. In the Kursk region, Ukraine controls 1,046 square kilometers, with another 257 in the grey zone, for a total area of 1,303 square kilometers. Although the number of attacks increased significantly, there was very little change to territorial control. Today's podcast will focus on the significant changes and major events that happened on Monday. Ready? Here we go. The Ukrainian counter-invasion of Russia enters its 57th day, and today was the first deadline set by autocrat Vladimir Putin for the liberation of the Kursk region. The new deadline is October the 15th. Good luck with that. Starting near Tetkina and Glushkova, there are indications that fighting is moving west and northwest of Veselaya, and the grey area was expanded to the village of Kalinina. Ukrainian forces attacked Russian positions in Volfina with drones, confirming the existing line of conflict on our war map. Semi-reliable Russian mail bloggers denied claims that Ukrainian forces withdrew from Medvezhye. The Russian Ministry of Defense, or Armad, continues to report ongoing fighting at Novy Put. The closest point of the line of conflict is over 3 kilometers away on the southern edge of Veselaya. Satellite images confirmed that the Russian pontoon bridges northwest of Glushkova and in Zvanaya remain intact. In Glushkova, social order continues to deteriorate. Russian soldiers and residents have moved past looting and are vandalizing abandoned stores and lighting fires. We'll link to the video in today's situation report, and there is more information in the podcast description. Russian mercenary mail blogger Two Majors claimed that Russian forces liberated Obukhovka, that's the one near Koreneva, becoming the largest mail blogger to admit that the village was never fully under Russian control after the September the 10th counteroffensive. Despite high clouds partially blocking today's satellite pass, combat-related fires were still visible in the southeastern part of the village, and we dispute Two Majors' claims that Ukrainian forces withdrew. Multiple Russian sources reported fighting continued in the area of Lyubimovka, which remains under Ukrainian control. Armad reported fighting was ongoing in the areas of Nikolaeva-Daryina and Olgovka. Two Majors dismissed even less reliable mail blogger claims that Russia captured Sverdlikova, correctly pointing out that Ukraine still controls Nikolaeva-Daryina, and Lyubimovka. Russian mercenary mail blogger Rybar reported that fighting was ongoing at Kremyanaya, with Ukrainian forces, quote, in the forest belts to the east. Based on combat-related fires and the location of recent Russian airstrikes, Ukrainian troops are also advancing from the south. Armad reported that Ukrainian forces were on the offensive at Kamyshevka. Had the Sentinel-2LA satellite pass not been partially obscured, we may have made a map adjustment to show a Ukrainian advance. There were clear indications of renewed fighting east of Kamyshevka, and northeast of Naidionov. However, there was not enough visibility to assess changes in territorial control. In another surprise, Two Majors claimed that Ukrainian forces continued to operate from Olgovka to Semyonovka, using the forest belts for movement. This is the first time in weeks that a Russian source has admitted that Ukrainian forces are as far north as Semyonovka. Russian sources continue to report there is fighting in the area of Plechova and are trying to spin the failed Russian armored assault from a week ago as a success. North of the city of Kursk near Tazovo, the Crimean Tatar insurgent organization destroyed a railroad relay box. In Ukrainian-occupied Sudzha, small-scale truth and reconciliation programs continued. Russian citizens were played the earlier statement made by Director of Information for the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Maria Zakharova, where she claimed Ukrainian forces had set up concentration camps. "Lies," one woman exclaimed. Quote, "We have doctors, we have the boys bring us water, we got everything we could, shame on her." Another woman was asked what she would say to Minister Zakharova. Quote, "She's a fool." Here is what's happening in my home of Ukraine. In Vovchansk, after multiple airstrikes by the VKS on the machine aggregate plant, Russian mail bloggers and commanders convinced themselves the complex was a no-man's land. They were very wrong. Russia launched the largest armored assault on the ruins of the city since May the 10th. The battalion-size attack involved 17 MTLB armored personnel carriers, 3 tanks and over 100 soldiers, in addition to the dismounts in the MTLBs. Instead of rolling back into the machine aggregate plant, the convoy was ambushed from 3 sides, as well as attacked by drones. 16 MTLBs and 1 tank were destroyed. Ukrainian sources claimed up to 100 Russian troops were killed and wounded in the failed assault, and graphic pictures of the aftermath support the claims. In the Donbas, Russian forces concentrated their attacks on Selidove, trying to encircle the settlement. A platoon of mechanized infantry advancing from between Marinivka and Mikhailivka on the E50 highway reached the gas station north of the coal mine before being repulsed. Russian forces have reached this gas station at least 2 times over the summer, but were unable to consolidate their gains. It is unlikely this will be a successful direction as long as Ukraine controls the coal mine at Mikhailivka. We expanded the grey area but did not change the line of conflict. South of Selidove, Russian forces continue to expand their area of control on the railroad between the settlement and the village of Tsukurina. Fighting was ongoing on the eastern edge of the village, with Russian forces likely advancing from occupied Ukrainsk. Ukrainian forces have almost certainly started their withdrawal from Vuhledar. Russian forces advanced from all 3 directions, raising a flag in the Parking Collective and a high rise in the western part of the Ukrainian stronghold. In the Mykolaiv Oblast, a Russian Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile struck a freight train in Kazanka that appeared to be carrying ammunition. The video, which we linked to, was low quality but provided a battle damage assessment after the strike, which supports Russia's claims. There weren't any significant theater-wide developments, so we'll end today's podcast in the land of Mobiks, Mobilization and Mir. Russian propagandist Denis Kulaga was injured near Chasiv Yar after the 4-wheeler ATV he was riding was struck by a drone. It is unclear if Kulaga is the male blogger who Russian sources claimed was killed over the weekend, or if this is a different attack. Autocrat Putin made an address for the so-called Reunification Day, marking the 2nd anniversary of Russia's illegal and unrecognized annexation of the Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson oblasts of Ukraine. Putin listed off his standard grievances rooted in disinformation, propaganda and revisionist history. Through a statement, the G7 declared the bloc of nations, along with the European Union, would never recognize the annexation and, quote, stand firmly with Ukraine and its territorial integrity, sovereignty and independence. Putin also changed the National Security Council of Russia, adding Alexei Dyumin, Putin's former bodyguard and the appointed leader of the defense of the Kursk Oblast, Alexander Linets, the chief of the Directorate for Special Programs of the Russian President, Denis Manturov, the first Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, and Dr. Veronika Skvortsova, the former Minister of Health of the Russian Federation. Vladimir Yakushev, the first Deputy Speaker of the Federal Council, was removed. 2 of the new appointees, Alexei Dyumin and Alexander Linets, are within Putin's inner circle. Denis Manturov was famously dressed down by Putin on national television in 2023 after Russian industry failed to reach aircraft manufacturing targets. Dr. Skvortsova is the most interesting new member. She resigned as Minister of Health in January 2020, before the COVID outbreak, in protest of Putin's announced changes to the Russian constitution, which broadened his personal power. The Russian Ministry of Defense set a goal of 133,000 troops for the fall conscription. Legally, conscripts are restricted from engaging in combat, with limited exceptions. Their use on the front lines is extremely unpopular among the Russian population, and it is one of the only political issues that Putin continues to respond to. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.